The Sony A7 IV was released in 2021, and first quarter 2025, we were supposed to see the announcement of the Sony A7 V, but it's been postponed, unfortunately, due to a variety of reasons. Some say they're waiting on the Canon R6 Mark III prices to come first. Some say the specs weren't up to par, so now they're pushing it back, but it has been postponed until probably quarter 3 or quarter 4 of 2025. With that being said, I still want to make a video on my Sony A7V wishlist and things that I want to see in this new camera to really compete with its competition, in my opinion, which is the Canon R6 Mark II. I don't know enough about Nikon to say what the competition is on Nikon, but definitely I came from Canon, and I think its direct comparison to Canon is the R6 Mark II. So I kind of want to dive into this, get my wish list, and go from there. One thing you won't hear me talk about in today's video is rolling shutter, because a lot of people said that the rolling shutter was really bad on the A7 IV. But I feel like if you're shooting anything and you're getting rolling shutter, the footage isn't usable anyway. And you know how fast you got to whip in that camera in order to get rolling shutter. So it's kind of a pointless thing to talk about because it's just stupid. Anyway, so I want to talk about wish list and things that kind of apply to me and things that I want to see, and maybe you'll agree on some. If you don't come for me in the comments. It's just my opinion. Anyway, so the first thing I want to talk about that I think it would be cool to see in a Sony A7V is a stacked or backside illuminated CMOS sensor. So on the sensor on the A7 IV is just regular CMOS, but I think stacked or backside illuminated will improve the low light performance. The low light performance on the A7 IV now isn't bad. I think it's pretty good, actually. You can crank the ISO and still get a really usable image, even at past 1,000, even at 2,000 and 2,500. And there's not like a significant amount of grain in your image. But I feel like a stacked or backside illuminated sensor is just going to up the ante on this camera just that much more. So that's one of the things that I want to see on a Sony A7 V. Another thing that I would love to see on a Sony A7 V, which probably won't happen, is CF Express Type B cards instead of the Type A cards that were in the Sony A7 IV. This is solely for price for the most point, because CF Express Type A cards are significantly more expensive than CF Express Type B cards, but at the same time, CF Express Type B cards are actually faster and actually hold more storage on a broader basis than CF Express Type A. So you're probably getting like 80 gigs, 90 gigs or whatever on a CF Express Type A, and the megabits per second at which it reads and writes is probably like 700. Versus CF Express Type B, you're probably getting 128 gig card and is reading and writing at 1700 megabits per second versus 700. So it's significantly faster and they're more affordable and you get more storage out of them. And I think it'll be better to see that in a Sony A7 V than what we've been seeing with the CF Express Type A in the Sony A7 IV. Now it is a 33 megapixel camera and does record 422 10-bit for video. So V90s usually get the job done, but if you just want that extra oomph and if you want to just shoot a little bit more, or you want to do a little bit more in video and really put it through its paces, I think a CF Express Type B card will really help for any type of shoot that you're doing. So I like CF Express Type A. I like the idea of it, but at the same time, I think CF Express Type B is a better use case and more feasible for a lot of people for their shooting scenarios. Another thing I would love to see in a Sony A7 V is in-camera false color. So this is one of those things that the Canon R6 Mark II had, which I really loved when I used that camera. Now, false color isn't a big deal for me at this point because I use a monitor and the monitor gives me false color. So I don't necessarily need it in camera, but it'll be kind of cool for it to have it in camera for people who don't use a monitor, or they don't have a monitor, or they can't afford a monitor yet. They can still practice reading the histogram on the false color, the, what's it called, REI scale. I think it's REI. That's false color, right? REI. I think that's what it is. I'm blanking, but yeah, I think it'd be pretty cool to have in-camera false color. Now, I know some people are going to say that the Sony A7 V should have LUTs, LUT preview on their videos. We should have LUT preview, and that's not going to happen, because if they put LUT preview in a Sony A7 V, then they're going to be competing with the FX30 and the FX3, their cinema line. It's the same reason why Apple doesn't put touchscreen into the MacBook Pros, then they're going to be competing with the demand of their iPads. Then more people are going to buy MacBooks, and then one of them aren't going to last. Either the iPads are going to take the world by storm, and MacBook Pros are going to die off, or if they put touchscreen in MacBook Pros, then everybody buy MacBook Pros, and then the iPads kind of die off. It's just, you don't want to compete with yourself. So they're probably not going to put Lut Preview inside the A7V V because they want to really push their cinema line and have their hybrid line or photo line totally separate from cinema line. So it makes sense why they wouldn't put Lut Preview inside the A7V. So I'm not expecting that. But in camera false color, I think that'll be really cool to see. And another thing that I would love to see in the Sony A7V, which is the biggest thing that really matters to me, is uncropped 4K 60. I'm not too crazy about 120. I really don't care for 120 frames per second. 60 frames per second is quite enough for me because of what I do when I'm shooting video. If I'm using 6 frames per second, I'm slowing it down in slow motion, and I'm probably shooting a wedding, making a highlight film or engagement or something like that. So 120 frames per second doesn't really, doesn't really do anything for me. Now, I see the benefit of 120 frames per second. Like, let's say you're shooting sports or wildlife, or you're shooting like birds or something like that. Then I can understand 120 frames per second for video. But for me personally, I personally don't care, or I wouldn't get anything out of 120. So I know some people are going to want 120 for what they do, but for what I do, 120 doesn't really mean anything to me. But I do think an uncropped 4K 60 would change the game for the Sony A7V, especially when you're trying to compare it with the set to be released Canon R6 Mark III, which will probably have everything and more. I mean, the Canon R6 Mark II was like the perfect camera. And like I said, that's the camera I came from. I switched from that to Sony, and everything about it was great. And I think that if they can take a step ahead of that Mark II and be equivalent with the R6 Mark III, then they'll be in talks of, being that premium hybrid camera. And I think this is one of those things that they need to fix if they want to be considered in the line of premium hybrid camera. You need to uncrop 4K 60. I mean, maybe 120. I doubt that'll be in there, but you definitely need to uncrop 4K 60. And the last thing that I want to see in a Sony A7V is a camera under $3,000. The Sony's A7 IV was priced at $2,500. At the time that I got it, it was $2,000 or like $2,100. It was $2,098, $2,100. So I definitely would like to see a camera under $3,000. Like, it would be nice if the Sony A7 IV was to drop to like $1,900, and then the Sony A7 V was like $2,600. But if it's over $3,000, I think that's kind of overkill. I think it would be nice to have under a $3,000 camera with all these things in there. And then even some additional ones because everybody has different needs. So if they can meet the needs of just about everybody, I know they're not going to meet the needs of everybody because everybody has something they're going to complain about. But if they can kind of tailor it to the masses with the Sony A7V and keep that under $3,000, I think that'll be, a winner. But that's my video. That's my take on my wish list for the Sony A7V. Leave a comment down in the description below if you have a wish list or something that you want in this new Sony A7V when it's announced, probably Q3 or Q4 of 2025. With that being said, like and subscribe to the channel. There'll be a lot more content like this where it came from, and I can't wait to talk about the Sony A7V once it's officially announced. And also, because the Sony A7V got pushed back, there is another full frame E-mount camera. I think they said like for hobbyists or something like that, or niche camera. It's a niche camera, but they'll probably have some information soon, according to Sony rumors. And there's also rumored to be another G Master lens coming soon, which I probably won't buy. You know me, I'm all about buying third party now, whatever. Nah, but there's another G Master lens coming soon, and if it makes sense, I'll definitely have to check it out and maybe, get it in, review it, test it, and, go from there. So, like I said, like and subscribe to the channel, and yeah, I'm gonna holler at y'all next time. Peace.